Hello, and welcome to Getting Engagement in the Midst of Chaos. If you're joining us live, our speakers are in the chat discussion answering your questions right now. For audio-video issues, you can click the technical support button below. I'd now like to turn it over to Eric Krohn and Javad Malik for the presentation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our session, Getting Engagement in the Midst of Chaos. I'm Javad Malik, and alongside me is my wonderful colleague, Eric Krohn.
It's great to be here, Javad. If you've ever heard of me, I don't know if you have. My background, I've been in IT and security since, mid-1990s is when I got into this. Always been a big fan of the human element, so that's kind of what I focused on throughout my career. But if you have a CISSP, something like that, you may have got a letter from me in the last few years. That's one of the things that I did as a Director of Member Relations and Services for ISC Squared. But as I said, we've been very focused over the years on the human element, which is something Javad and I are going to talk about quite a bit right here. Javad?
Yeah, sure. So this is me. Despite my youthful young looks, I have been working in the industry for about 20 years. It was my first job, IT security and a bit of consulting, and I was an industry analyst. Maybe you've been on YouTube and you've seen a few videos of mine, and that's really what I wanted, a way to try and explain security to the average person. And that's what got me attached to, we have a lot of technical solutions for things, but we're not really that great at, or we didn't back in the day have many resources for educating people or connecting with them. So that's what brought me to this stage of my career. But the talk we are going to do, it's a classic 3-act show. We're going to talk about some of the disruptions. We're going to talk about some of the attacks that are happening against home workers. And then finally, we will go into what defenses we can all deploy. So disruptions, what disruptions are we seeing? Eric, talk us through this photo, please.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. This is the Imperial Palace there in Tokyo. And what we notice here right away is that people have been out and about far less than they originally were, right? I don't know about you, but my travel schedule has definitely changed, like how often I'm on the road and things like that. This is a couple of pictures. This was back in February and then again in April. And you'll see there were 63% less cars on the road. And so it's definitely impacted a lot of our habits, even just in how we get out and about.
And that's changed in the physical world, but in the online world, we've seen spikes in traffic. And unfortunately, one of those spikes has been in the number of phishing emails relating to the pandemic. So you'll see, like, from about March onwards, there's almost been a vertical rise in the number of phishing emails out in the wild that have been latching onto the COVID-19 pandemic. We have this broken out in this chart by waves. So you see wave 1. This is a way to think of it like this. It's gone from just a custom thing that a few people are trying out, which was wave 1. Wave 2 is where it begins to get traction, and you see like ancillary services targeted. So it's not just the CDC or the United Nations saying, hey, here's a healthcare, here's something to do with the health of COVID-19, click here. But then we get other institutes being spoofed as well, like your bank will be like, you're entitled to some payments or government relief, and click here. And wave 3 is the scary part, which is where we see criminals actually package all of these together into their phishing kits. So if you go on the dark web or wherever they're trading and you want to pay a bad guy to give you a phishing kit, that's prepackaged templates that you can send out to victims of your choice, you will get a whole bunch of customizable COVID-19 related phishing templates there. And that's where you see the bulk of them coming in. So it's really quite scary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And the world has had to adjust to this, not only to, the differences in how we're getting out physically, but the other things that are happening as well, like you showed just there. I mean, it's amazing to me that we had such a big spike in the number of things there. Now, part of this and part of what's complicating this is the fact that a lot of information has been put out about a lot of big things. For example, here, the Tokyo Olympics and cancellations with large sporting events and other things like that around the world has definitely taken its toll. But what's happened is a lot of cases, the organizations or the governments behind the changes that are happening haven't actually been able to get the complete information to people. And so that makes it very ripe for phishing attacks. If you give somebody some information, like here in the US, they said everybody's got to work from home, but then they didn't really give them a whole lot of guidance as to how that worked and what that meant and things to watch out for and what you need to do to actually accomplish it. So the bad guys were able to take that and then turn around very quickly and prey on that, promising to give you that missing bit of information. And that's one of the reasons the phishing stuff went so crazy. Now, we know that it impacted the economy as well. Uncertainty drives concern, obviously. The economic changes, the prices have gone up. I shop a lot on Amazon.com, and I've noticed that a lot of the common things that I used to get on Amazon, either the prices have gone way, way up, especially things like here in the US, plexiglass or the clear acrylic sheets that everyone is now using between the registers. Those prices went way up, and it is extremely hard to find these days, along with the other normal things. And of course, you know, this is something that we understand. People are concerned; they're worried about it. They're panic buying, right? It was kind of like what happened in the beginning, where everybody bought a lot of toilet paper, and you couldn't get toilet paper in the stores here. You know, it's a silly thing to do, but everyone was afraid. They're like, "What happens if I run out of that?" Right? That's a pretty major deal. Now, the thing is, this has happened before, and it continues to happen. It will happen again. We see this kind of stuff because of the uncertainty with natural and unnatural events. Whenever there are major news breaking events, things like that, it is always going to be something that's followed up by phishing attacks or some sort of social engineering attacks. I live in Florida here. We deal with a lot of weather every year. And what happens is we end up running out of plywood to put up over our windows and water. And it happens every year during this time. But the anxiety drives that panic buying, which is kind of a scary thing.
And talking about unexpected cases, this is something I picked up on in the news, and I thought it was just a really good example of how we don't know what all the things in the supply chain that are going to be impacted by something like the pandemic. So in San Diego, if you were a buyer of meth, not that I advocate anyone that actually buys meth, you'd see that there was a 40% increase in price. Why? Because Wuhan has a cottage industry apparently there where they supply the raw elements that are used to make meth. They couldn't get out of the country because they were on lockdown and cargo planes were grounded. The Mexican cartels were the biggest importer of this drug, and they couldn't get their hands on it. On top of that, the border between Mexico and the US was completely shut because of the pandemic. So as a result, less supply, more demand, and prices shot up. So this brings us on to, like, what does this mean for home workers? And I think this is a good way of visualizing why attacking home workers is a really good strategy for bad guys. I mean, good from their perspective, not from our perspective, obviously. And the three key areas are there are mental issues in the sense that people are anxious, people are worried, people are looking for information. They want to know whether they've still got a job, whether they're going to get paid or not. There's organizational challenges, like many organizations were not prepared to go 100% remote workforce or to enforce social distancing. So, you know, they've been trying to struggle and try to roll out fixes, in many cases lowering security. And then the third element there is the home environment. When someone is working from home all the time, they don't have the security or the luxury of protections of working within your corporate environment. So all of these things coming together make that perfect storm of why attacking home workers is such a lucrative business for criminals these days. This is kind of like a visualization. Home workers are like blood in the water, and the criminals are sharks. So this is a good example. Like Shodan, they released a blog and they showed a spike in the number of RDP ports that were exposed to the internet as soon as home working started. And in a lot of cases, this is just people trying to ensure that, you know, their systems work. So they're putting in place these quick fixes. It's kind of like technical debt that they're accruing. And we can't say it's necessarily wrong because they're trying to keep the business on the road. But keep in mind that you're putting in place all these changes and you need to wind these back at some point, or you need to monitor these, because the bad guys certainly are. Because where you've got Shodan reporting a spike in RDP, you've got Kaspersky released this report saying that RDP brute forces have increased so much. So if you're an organization that is desperately trying to get your employees working and you're implementing these types of controls, or maybe you're not rolling out 2FA or monitoring controls, then you're going to be blind to a lot of these attacks.
Yeah, absolutely, Javad. And, there's some new tools that people started using with this, right? Along with RDP, a lot of people went to these other collaboration platforms. You have a lot of people that have never touched a collaboration platform in their lives, and all of a sudden, their whole day circles around these collaboration platforms, things like Zoom. And we saw them being heavily targeted. And it started out with some smaller things, the Zoom bombing. And a lot of that was caused really because people didn't know how to set up the rooms or the meetings in a secure fashion, right? They just open a room up and then whoever had the link could come in. And people were, the bad guys were throwing in random letter sets and things and just popping into these things and doing bad things. Now, the other thing that happened is because it took off so much, now all of a sudden, the bad guys have pivoted and focused on this because they know that it's in use way more than it ever was before. So they start focusing some efforts on that, right? We always put our efforts towards something that's going to give us the best return. And so when they do that, they're finding vulnerabilities. Same thing with security researchers. They went, whoa, wait a minute, this has taken off. They turn their effort on that, and they start seeing a lot of these vulnerabilities as well. So there was a lot of stuff that happened around that. There was a lot of scariness, honestly, that went around that. There are still companies that will not use Zoom because of some of the earlier things that were found. There was even a case where there were a bunch of usernames and passwords supposedly from Zoom that were dumped out there. But a lot of that was actually from previous breaches, or what they had done is they had taken those credentials from previous breaches and tested them on the Zoom platform using credential stuffing or something and found out that they do in fact work. So that's actually how a lot of those got out there. It wasn't necessarily always the platform, but people were not used to that. Now, what we have to understand in these days is with the stress of using these new platforms and all this other stuff that we just talked about, attackers use psychology against us. And what they do is they a lot of times attack our emotions. Well, the first thing we have to understand is our brain's job is to filter, interpret, and present reality. The things we taste, the things we smell, the things we feel, okay? Those are all reality to us, but our brain does a lot of filtering. And just to give you an example, if you take and you look left, look right with your eyes right now, you probably don't see your nose, right? But that's because your brain actually filters it out of your vision. It's a thing that your brain does automatically. If you wear glasses like I do, I don't see my glasses until I think about it. This is your brain doing that. Well, the attackers a lot of times will use psychology, they'll use emotions in order to turn around and attack that portion. It's really quite amazing how well this works. And this brings us to social engineering. During these times, it's crazy. Now, social engineering generally has a bad term to it, but it can also be used for good, like getting people to pay attention to training, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But when it comes to the bad side, we need to understand, are we being manipulated? And they use greed, like the Nigerian prince scams that we've heard of. Curiosity, like clickbait ads. Self-interest. Urgency is a big one, too. There's very rarely have I ever even thought to hear of, a phishing attack or a vishing or smishing attack, which is voice or text message phishing as well, that says something along the lines of, whenever you feel like it, go ahead and take care of this, right? It's always like, oh, something's going on. We're in an acquisition or something's happening here. There's always a sense of urgency to it. And then, of course, fear. People get scared. There's threats against people. Something bad is going to happen if you don't reply to this. And then there's the helpfulness. And we see that here in the U.S. sometimes with the phone calls that say, hey, your nephew's in jail. This is his lawyer. We need you to post bond, blah, 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 blah. There's that kind of stuff, too, that happens as well. But these are all emotional attacks, and they're designed to get us to kind of mess up what it is we're doing or impact our actions. Now, social media is a key point of this. There is so much stuff going on social media these days with the misinformation. It's incredible. There was a Carnegie Mellon study over here on the right-hand side. They were talking about, in the beginning especially, the tweets about coronavirus. About half of them were actually bots or bot-like behavior. And so these things are being amplified. They're being put out there. There's a lot of fear and anxiety that's going on through these. And then here in the U.S., we have the issue with George Floyd, which has gone worldwide at this point. But they found that almost or more than half of the social media posts about that were either from bots or from known trolls, people that are just trying to stir up more anxiety. And something we don't think about very often is mental fatigue. As we process this stuff every day, our brains actually get tired. We don't feel it like our arms and legs get tired, but our brain definitely gets tired. So this is the kind of stuff that they throw at them in emails. You can see these sorts of things. Very much, fear-based attacks. They want to get somebody to do something. So now we have to engage in the defense. Javad?
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for scaring us all. I'm certainly worried about things now. But so let's get into some of the defensive tactics. And one thing we in the security world, as security professionals, we always say, have a plan of action for when things go wrong. But to quote my favorite philosopher, Iron Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And this is so true because, just giving people information or just telling people that, hey, you're at risk, does not actually change their behavior. And so we as security professionals, we need to ask ourselves, do you care more about what your employees know or how they behave? And that is a critical point here. It doesn't matter whether they can recite, all your policies backwards. If that doesn't result in changed behavior, it won't work. Example I like to use is I'm driving along the road. It's late. The roads are empty. There's dry conditions. I've got a powerful car, and the speed limit says 30. Well, I'm aware the speed limit is 30, but will it change my behavior? And that's not something I'm going to discuss on camera. But I think it's important to have realistic goals because humans are complex creatures. And if you've tried anything in your life, you know that change, you can only make small changes at a time. Apparently, the most amount of habits you can change at any one point is 3. Any more than that, and you just won't be able to cope. So say you want to sleep less, you want to eat clean, and you want to train more. So, for example, if you try to do those, you might succeed. But if you try to do anything more than that, and also I want to learn how to play the piano, and also I want to get a degree, and you're going to fail at all of them. So we need to set realistic goals in what we expect employees to do and how they can better defend themselves. A good example is from the world of marketing, and marketing is, like Eric, like you said earlier, is kind of like that the positive spin on social engineering. You're trying to deliver a message to someone continuously. When I was young in the 80s, growing up here in the UK, there was this campaign called Clunk Clink, even on the shortest trips, and that was to get people to wear seatbelts in their cars. And it was just a short, repeatable message, and it was repeated on TV, on the radio, on billboards. And it was drummed in time and time again, and it got to the point where now I don't even think about it. I just put on my seatbelt. The interesting thing about that is that now I have kids, and they just observe me, my wife, other elders just putting on their seatbelt. So as soon as they get in, even my youngest, he'll like get on the car and say, "Dad, seatbelt, seatbelt." So, this is learned behavior through leadership. So if you have good leaders, if your execs are demonstrating good security value, they're living by it, it becomes a lot easier for even your untrained employees. They might not. So my kids don't even know the reason. They haven't been exposed to this campaign, yet they still abide by the values. And this is what we mean by think like a marketer, get them to change behavior, not necessarily like bombard them with information. This is a great example I found. Apparently, the Banmeido sponge cake is very popular in Japan. And this is taken from their website. And if you just read through the paragraphs, it's like our egg yolk is different from other places. We raise chickens in natural valleys with organic grass and corn to make the yolk have a fresh color and intense taste. And that's something quite visceral. It invokes something in your brain. You can almost taste, I can almost taste the cake right now. And that's not giving me any bland information. There's not a spreadsheet of nutrients or calories or anything. It's just describing it. And this is where we often go wrong. When we look at how we treat users, we say, well, set up MFA, or, choose a strong password, or do this, or just do that. That's the wrong approach, because we're not invoking anything on the emotional level. We're not bringing them into our world. We're just speaking at them. And that's where a lot of training goes wrong. Nudges are a great example of how you can, without forcing someone, you build them the choice architecture that gives them the impotence to do the right thing, or the thing that is the desired behavior. So you can see these stairs, they're also, I think, from Japan, but they have calories written on them. So if you take one step, it's half a calorie. If you take, and so it's psychologically, you're encouraging people to use the stairs, get fitter, as opposed to using the escalator. The yellow sign is a cigarette butt disposer, and to encourage people, or to nudge them to throw their cigarette butts in there, they've asked the question, who's the best player in the world? Is it Ronaldo or Messi? And I can see Eric looking with a blank stare. Being American, he has no idea what football, what he calls soccer, actually is, or who these players are. But I'm sure you will all appreciate Ronaldo is the better player. And at the top, you have the example of passwords. And, this is a good example that you're not forcing someone to choose a really complex password, but you're giving them the choice. You can choose that as a as a password, but it's not great. And psychologically, you're influencing someone to say, I don't want something that says not great. I want the one that says great, or the one with the smiley face. So they'll keep making their password more so until it hits that point. Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when you're talking about dealing with people. You do need to build that engagement. It has to be something that's, something that relates to them. And I think that cigarette butt thing is very good example of that for people that are into those sports. It makes them want to do something. Now, when you're building this engagement, there's some learning techniques that we want to share. These are things that we've learned over stuff that we've done, we've seen out there in the real world. One of the biggest things I got to say is we need to establish a baseline and work from there. A lot of places don't start by establishing a baseline and figuring out where they are. One of the easiest ways to do this is through phishing, obviously, and the attacks that come through that, how many people are clicking on things. That's a good thing to start with, and then you're going to try to shape that behavior. So you determine where you are now. You take the lessons, you make it relatable to them. You make it something that they are going to care about, not something that's completely foreign to them. You also want to get your leadership involved as well. So like you mentioned with the seatbelts, your kids see you do that. And so now this is an accepted part of culture. It is accepted. And if they don't do that, it actually feels a little weird, right? And that's what you're going for. Now, leadership can be an extremely strong influencer in that. And if they're on board, having them publicly doing some of the actions that you say will definitely make it more comfortable for those that might feel uncomfortable changing their way. They'll have a little bit more confidence. The other thing you can do, and this is a fantastic tip that works, is find some of the people in your organization that are already predisposed to be somewhat security conscious anyways. Get those people on board with you and have them demonstrate those patterns of behavior that you want them to do. So then the people out there, they have their leadership demonstrating the behaviors, and they see their peers also doing it as well. And it makes it much, much easier for them to do that. Now, we kind of touched on this a few times already, but have entertaining material that holds attention. We have all been in those meetings where we just wanted to throw ourselves out the window as opposed to sit there and listen to this thing any longer, right? All we want to do is leave the meeting. People feel that way about training too, if we don't make it relevant and at least somewhat entertaining. And that's a big problem for people. They will tune out and not hear the message you're trying to get through. One of the key things that I know is when it comes to teaching people, when they walk away, like when you walk away from this presentation, you're not going to remember every bullet and every slide, but you are going to remember how you felt, how we let you feel or made you feel during this, and you will associate that with some of the material that we present. Remember that. People need to walk away feeling good about things. So when it comes to this, fish people along with your awareness stuff. If you want to get them on board, make it gamified. And this can actually be a good thing. Some people are like, oh, simulated fishing, but what you do is you gamify it. And I see people do this for things as small as parking spots or maybe a little trophy or, leaderboard stuff. I've even seen organizations take different departments or different branches and compete against each other for the lowest click rates and things like that. It gets people really into it. And then you want to review the results. You want to look at what's going on. Again, measurement is very important here. And this is where you see, especially in the fishing side, if people are falling for a certain type of fishing more than others, you may want to adjust where your training goes. Like if they're falling for, the ones that have you click on links that are related to food, perhaps, you want to make sure that they understand this and they're better able to pick those things out. So look for those trends, look for the areas that need improvement or ones you want to emphasize. And a lot of this is honestly just marketing stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, to touch upon a point, the only reason, even now when I work from home, even if I'm popping out to just get a glass of water, I will lock my screen. And the reason for that is in one of my first jobs, we were all young, and it was a classic. If you didn't lock your workstation when you walked away, you'd get an email sent to the entire department saying, I'm buying lunch for everyone today, or something like that. So, and, it was just a fun game. It was harmless. No one really took offense to it, but it just drilled it into everyone like, oh, control, delete, boom, before you step away from there. But yeah, so coming back onto track, this is a busy slide, and you can ask us in the chat about this if you want to go into details. But this is just setting out an example of this is what like a marketing campaign typically looks like. And if you apply it to security awareness, you have ongoing phishing going along the top, and then you have all the different channels that support it. So your executives will say the same message. Your learning management system will have those modules. Your newsletters, your digital signage, your screensavers, the gifts that you give out, or the branded items. Everything will reinforce the same message that you want changed for that particular campaign. I really like this Bruce Lee quote. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So just like any marketing thing, its repetition is the mother of all learning. And the more you repeat something to your audience, the more likely they are to remember it. If you've ever been whitewater rafting or anything, they will say like, if you fall into the water, push with your legs, look for the raft, grab the hand, that they drill it into you time and time and time again until it becomes second nature.
Yeah, as we've been in security, a lot of us have probably heard the thing saying, we can't train people. We just can't train people. And that's something that, it's a soapbox issue for me. Again, I've been dealing with the human factor for quite some time. I'll tell you this, we can train people if you follow a couple of different things. This is just an example. This was 4 million people that they tracked over the course of a year. Initial click rates on phishing was 38%, which is huge. That's a big problem. 90 days later, just 3 months later, down about 14%. And at the end of a year, down to 5%. Don't expect perfection. There will be some clicks that are going to happen. There will be some errors that are going to be made. The idea is to train them when they do have those issues and have them learn from those as well. So don't expect perfection, but it can be done. And it's a very powerful thing if we get it relevant to them and we get them interested in it. So Javad, how about some takeaways here?
So these are things that we've split out into immediate, midterm, and long-term. These are just some examples. But my personal favorite is in the midterm here, where work with other departments. You can't do everything by yourself. But HR and marketing teams are designed to, they're experts in communicating with your staff, with your audience. So leverage them, leverage all the resources you have around you.
Yep, Eric, absolutely. I agree 100%. Get with the people that are trained to do that. So that being said, we're going to be in chat here. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in there as well. And here's our information if you want to get back to us afterwards. We are happy to answer any questions there as well. But I know we're just about out of time. Yes. You got any parting words there, Javad?
So thank you very much. If you have any complaints, send them to Eric. Any praise, send them to my email address. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been our absolute pleasure and honor.